The Crystal Hive is back, ladies and gentlemen. Got myself hitched. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, off the market. But without further ado, welcome. Thank you for being accepting of the break of my content. Going through a rebranding. So I'm not going to be streaming as much. I might stream more spontaneously, probably on weekends. But my weeknights now are going to be spent more on producing this pre-recorded content, much like this video. But without gabbing too much, I want to get more into really what the content of this video is about. Does Fantasy Flight actually give a shit about their players? Just put it out there. We saw a couple more Vault Tours come out. I'm going to talk about that to start. Fantasy Flight, for one, has finally started streaming their own content. Doesn't rely on the community of the content providers that are able to attend those Vault Tours. Now Fantasy Flight streams their own content on their own Twitch channel. Awesome. Awkward thumbs up there. 2 thumbs up to Fantasy Flight for that. That's something the community's been asking for a long time. But my biggest grub is the Vault Tour formats. Stop making Vault Tours fucking sealed. Just getting a little heated here. The reason most people attend Vault Tours is not because they want to buy a brand new deck, spend all this money potentially traveling and hotels and food and renting a car if you're from out of the state or out of driving distance. They want to go to these tournaments to meet players that they never would meet otherwise, attend a tournament, play the decks they know are strong, and see how they fare against potentially the rest of the world, if not this local pocket of players, more of a regional pocket of players. I personally do not want to go to one of these tournaments, play sealed, open a crappy deck like my sealed luck, and scrub out at 0-3, drop and play side events. I want to go to a Vault Tour to flex my muscles with the best 1, 2, or 3 decks that I own, or what I perceive to be my best, and just see how I do against other competitive players. I'm not going to keep going off on this. Fantasy Flight, please stop making main events for Vault Tours and other events like the Grand Tournament, I think that's called. Stop making them sealed. I don't want to see that. A lot of players will do it because they want to get new decks. I get it. It's probably a cash grab on Fantasy Flight side. Just stop. Just stop. We're going to dive into more about a format that might have an issue with some of the tournament floor rules. But we're just going to dive into the meat of this video. So I've printed this document out. I even have taken notes. If you don't believe me, they're right. If my camera will focus, look, I circled something. I wrote over here in the margins. We're just gonna dive in. I am not gonna read this entire document. I yawn a lot when I read out loud, so bear with me. But we're just gonna go ahead and start with what I think is a really cool addition for casual players who are trying to get into this tournament into this game of Keyforge. And it just says, as a general rule, warnings granted due to gameplay and non-behavioral event disruptions should be worth 1 fewer penalty point each at casual events. So I've highlighted the whole paragraph for all of these snippets. I'm not going to read all of them every single time. I'll read what's relevant. It does mention at the very bottom there that cheating should never have penalties reduced. Completely agree. Reason I'm highlighting this is because casual play, so chain bounds, weekly play nights, anything that is below, or chain bound or below, is considered casual. Anything above, in Keyforge, they're deeming competitive. This is saying, like, let's say someone forgets to do a trigger. They forget to grab an amber with a hunting witch out on the table when they play a creature. In competitive play, if both players fail to remember that trigger, they actually both get a penalty point. at 7 penalty points at casual, 5 penalty points at competitive, you lose your game and you risk being disqualified for the entire tournament. Please pay attention to that because that will become relevant later. But for this, if you forget a trigger at a casual event, your opponent and your TO remind you, you smile, you learn from it, you move on. I think this is great for players who are newer to the game, as well as just really making an inviting environment for new players to join the game. So, thumbs up for this one. There's also another point that talks about fixing errors. I need to actually flip through this because I'm totally 100% prepared to make this video. It talks about a ruling that a judge can make is to play on, resolve now, or rewind. They have those 3 options to fix an error. What I'm highlighting here is if the judge deems, or the head judge, if the judge can't make a decision, deems that the game cannot be rewound because too much has happened, then the game simply picks up exactly where it is and just moves on. Reason this is crucial to pay attention to is it reaches what I call a certain point of no return. There's just too much that's happened, too much amber has changed, too many cards have entered and exited play, you can't track what's happened in what order, rewinding would cause more issues. Then you're just stuck with whatever you didn't catch originally. So pay attention to what you do as well as what your opponent does, because it might come back and bite you in the ass, and you might be stuck playing in a game state that is disadvantageous to you, and it might actually ultimately result in you losing because you just weren't paying attention for maybe 10 seconds. So always keep your eyes peeled. If that means take it 10 seconds longer to take your turn, do it. Tardiness. This one's fun because this became really relevant in the Denver Vault Tour. There was a match in the top 16 in which the opponents that was sitting at the table next to me, their opponent did not show up for the match. The player did exactly what they're supposed to. They called a judge, and the judge comes over and says they have 10 minutes. Player refuted it. Head judge ended up agreeing with them, with the judge's ruling. But this now says very finitely in a card game. Surprise, Keyforge is a card game. We are back. Gonna be some weird splicing a couple seconds before this, but whatever. Surprise, Keyforge is a card game that if you do not show up to your match within 5 minutes of the announced start time, you automatically are marked as absent, and being marked as absent earns you 1 penalty point, and you automatically lose that game. I think further down, I didn't quite highlight it, there's a discrepancy between losing that game and losing the entire match. Say it was a best of 3 match, but they're tardy to the first game. The rest of the match is allowed to play unless the head judge rules that this is a pattern of tardiness and they just lose the match. So there's some wiggle room there in terms of best of 3 matches. Rule of thumb, once your match is done, run to the bathroom, get some water, be there ready and waiting for pairings. Don't keep your opponent waiting. It's just a dick move if you do it intentionally. If you do it unintentionally, life happens. But this does say 5 minutes or more, you lose. This one's fun. The reason I think it's fun is because I don't know how this could ever happen. But in essence, at competitive games, they will often post pairings. So it'll be Brian is playing Mark. I'm just using Mark because the name came to mind. When you sit down at a table, generally the courteous thing to do at competitive play is, "Hi, are you Mark?" Shake hands, or whatever your culture appropriates. "My name's Brian. Nice to meet you. Good luck." that completely eliminates this potentiality. What it says is if both players in a match that are not supposed to be playing, so you're sitting at the wrong table or your opponent is at the wrong table, the opponent who sat down is considered to be tardy from the game they are supposed to be playing at. And they will be marked absent, and like I said before, they automatically get a loss. If you play a game against the wrong opponent and the game completes, you both are guilty of playing an incorrect match. You both receive penalties. This is because both players are responsible for paying attention to the pairings and making sure that they play against the correct opponent. Not much to say about this other than don't play the wrong person. Introduce yourself, ask them their name, pick up, move on. Now this one is the one that I read this floor rules document. I had to read this twice to make sure I understood it the right way, and I did. So let's say you draw 3 cards to get back up to your hand size. You draw 4 by accident. A couple things happen, you guys don't catch it, and your opponent, turn or 2 later, says, how are you drawing 2 cards? Shouldn't you be drawing 3? Just by the amount of cards you've been playing. They call a judge, you explain what happens, and what it comes down to is they deduce you drew too many cards at some point. If they cannot discern what the extra cards you drew were, the judge mandates that you reveal your entire hand to your opponent at current, so what you're currently holding. You reveal the entire hand to your opponent. Your opponent then gets to cherry pick. Yes, you read that right. Your opponent can look at your hand and get rid of the best card or cards you are holding and remove a number of cards from your hand equal to the number of extra cards drawn. So let's say I drew 3 extra cards. If I get caught, even if I'm doing it by accident, let's benefit it out. Let's say it was a complete mistake. I spilled some pop on them and the cards are sticking together or whatever. If the judge makes this ruling, I show my entire hand and my opponent chooses and discards 3 cards from my hand. Make sure you always count the right cards at competitive play. I did call a judge in a vault tour because my opponent was drawing cards in a really weird way and I wanted to make sure they were drawing the right number. Turns out they were. Just the way they were drawing, it was hard for me to track it. But if you have doubts or you're not quite sure if you're miscounting or if your opponent's doing something fishy, just call a judge. Worst case scenario, they say no, they're fine. Best case scenario, you get to pick what cards you want out of their hand. It's pretty sweet. Next one. This part of the document states that you can still concede a match at any point. It can be before the end of the game, so you can concede before your opponent even starts mulliganing or doing their initial draw or mulliganing. You can sit down from them and say, nice to meet you, my name's Brian, I concede, congratulations, you win. That counts as a concession. The moment that you start talking to your opponent or any other player at the tournament, hey, if I concede this match, I'm already in the top cut. If you get this win against me, you'll also make the cut, so I'm just going to concede. That is marked as collusion, and that can be marks for disqualification. It is counted cheating and rank manipulation. If you ask your opponent to concede, let's say you're the one that isn't quite in the cut yet and say, I know you can make the cut no matter what. Can you let me win? Because if I win, I move to the cut as well. You are, without a doubt, disqualified because you are asking your opponent to throw a game, which is also considered cheating. Now, I gotta flip to my notes here, but I had a thought about this. Master Vault Tours, or just Vault Tours. mixing the app name and the tournament name. Vault Tours. Survival format. It was the Denver Vault Tour format. There were a ton of players who were playing their decks in a very specific order that allowed them to concede 1 or 2 games to make sure they had their best deck going into day 2. Because as it currently stands, the way the format is being played at Vault Tours, whatever deck you are currently legally supposed to be playing, you must play on day 2. The reason I'm bringing this up is there was a lot of talk of players saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to concede my next match because then I get to my 3rd deck, which is my best deck, and I can probably win with that. The moment someone says that now, they can be disqualified for collusion. So you're either going to force everyone at Survival to be hush-hush, zipped lips about the order they're playing their decks and why, other than, oh, I think my best deck's 3rd, so if I get to it, I have the best chance of staying alive. That's not collusion. You're not talking about anything about I'm throwing a game, I'm conceding to get to that deck. You're just saying my best deck is last. But when you are sitting there talking to someone else that I'm going to concede to get my 3rd deck, you're colluding. Grounds for disqualification. Now, Fantasy Flight, this is probably an unintentional consequence, but it is a main gripe I have with the survival format in Vault Tours, is that if you survive, let's say you go 6-0 on day 1 with your first deck, you have 3 decks you should be able to choose from in day 2, but the deck you choose is the deck you're stuck with, instead of, oh, you have to play your first deck. It's just a slight change of the format ruling without changing the essence of the format that I think would allow this ruling, floor rules ruling, to stand without actually potentially compromising the way Vault Tours in the survival format are currently run. I also think that as a whole, the Vault Tours, we need some more variety in events for main events. It seems to be survival has become the mainstay. I would love to see Gem, the software for Keyforge, actually adapted to properly support adaptive format, because I've personally never played it other than for fun. I want to be in a tournament that is going to force me to play a deck I don't know, and then potentially have to bid chains on it to win a game. With all of that, I think as a whole, so going into Vault Tour formats, as well as this floor plan rules, I think Fantasy Flight is actually doing an awesome job about listening to the community about Keyforge. Again, this rules document is for all Fantasy Flight games, and it goes into effect immediately. Came out on the 25th. But from a Keyforge lens, they're doing such a great job about listening to the community. Brad and his team are really sticking true to the essence of the game that was the brainchild of Richard Garfield. I think that there's a lot of room to still improve about a greater rules clarification, as well as an operations window or an action window outline, which the team has said they are working on, so hold out for that. I think this is probably some of the best support, save for X-Wing, that Fantasy Flight has provided any of their games. Before I keep rambling, I could go on and on. I read documents like this for work all day, every day, and I edit them and check them, whatever. Boring. But I also love it. So if you have seen anything in the rules, the floor rules that you agree with, disagree with, things you found interesting, leave a comment below. Also, what are your thoughts about Fantasy Flight and how they're helping this game grow, as well as enticing new players to join while keeping the game fresh for veteran players who've been playing from day one, like me and most of you that are actually watching my content. We're going to leave it right there. I will be back next week with another video. I have no idea about what, but we'll figure it out. Until next time, it's been the Crystal Hive. Take care.